All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and do something a little bit different today. I found this really cool new thing where I can record my desktop and you guys can hear my voice. So hopefully that's working for you guys. If it's not, then you'll just get to look at this pretty presentation and you won't be able to hear my voice at all. So, that's great. But since you guys just started World War II before all of this craziness happened, I thought I'd kind of give you a little bit of a background information to help you understand a little bit better the packet that I sent home last week. So this is kind of one of my favorite PowerPoints I've ever been a part of. This is actually from one of my high school teachers that I had. She actually shared it with me so that I could kind of pass it along and share it to you guys. So this is actually, I think it's a really cool PowerPoint. There's a lot of pictures and a lot of information in it. We probably won't be going through it all today because when I get to explaining stuff, you guys know it sometimes it takes me a while, and I don't want to bore you guys to death in this already crazy, stir crazy time. So I'm probably just gonna go through maybe a few slides of it, and then we can come back each day and kind of update it and go through the next part of it. So let's go ahead and get started and do this little presentation thing. All right, so like I said, you guys are starting World War II, all right? Um, so we've kind of been talking about it. You kind of had to read about it in the packet if you read that. But other than that, we haven't really started in depth talking about what it really was, what people were fighting about, anything like that. And I know you guys know a few little things about, Adolf Hitler, the Holocaust, and things like that. But I feel like some of you don't know like the real in-depth details. Okay. So first thing, when we look at this picture and this opening screen, I want you guys to really investigate the photograph, the black and white picture that's in the background, and kind of just guess and see what it is that's going on in here. I mean, so these are American and British soldiers that are getting off. This is a picture that's demonstrating um, the D-Day battle. Okay, so D-Day is a famous, famous battle that took place in World War II that actually helped end. Uh, it started pushing us towards the end of the war for the European theater because there's two theaters in World War II. There's actually the European theater and there's the Pacific theater. So this was actually a good way to get the end of the European theater kind of rolling. So they get off of this ship that you can see off in the corners, and I'm sorry that the little slide pointer thing majigger over here keeps popping up, but it's the only way that I can move my mouse and kind of explain to you really what I'm talking about. So these boats, believe it or not, are actually called Higgins boats. So there's a little fun fact for you. But they're called Higgins boats. And if you can see at the very bottom of the picture, there's a ramp that falls down. So when you're kind of in this boat, you're all stacked up really close like sardines, just packed in there. And then this big ramp falls down in front of you, and you can run out to the shore up here. Well, what you don't see is back here behind the words, behind this ridge, are hundreds and hundreds of German soldiers that are aimed just directly at these guys. Okay, so when they come and this shield or this gate drops open, more than likely they're kind of like fish in a barrel. Okay, they got big targets on their back, so it's really dangerous and really scary. And so these guys are trying to go through the ocean to get up to this beach to then somehow make it to this ridge without getting shot and killed, right? So that's one scary thing. So you're getting shot at, but at the same time, you can see that this guy has a big pack on his back. Okay, so that's everything that he would need for this particular mission. Anything of his personal items, change of clothes, food, his canteen, any ammo that he would need, his rifle, all of the things that you would need to be a soldier is in your pack, right? The thing to understand about these, though, is that sometimes they could get up to as much as 150 pounds. So that's kind of like carrying another person on your back, right? And because of the fact that they're getting steady fire from the Germans, this becomes a dangerous area for these soldiers to be. So they have to kind of get off the boats a lot earlier in order to make it to the beach with a chance of being safer to make it to the beach. And so the ocean is water, right? A lot of these guys have never learned how to swim. So part of the problem, or what makes D-Day really scary, is some of these guys didn't even make it to the beach because they end up drowning in the ocean because of the fact that their packs were way too heavy for them to be able to get through the water, and they didn't know how to swim. So it just kind of drug them right down to the bottom. All right. So this is kind of like, I like to think of this as kind of a really good way to open up the conversation of what really was World War II and what we're looking at. I mean, this is a real picture of people who were storming the beaches in France and trying to defeat the Germans in their quest, basically. All right, so the first thing we're going to go to. Also, I apologize if it's slow or glitchy or anything. I think almost everybody in the entire universe is on the internet, so if it gets glitched, I apologize. But so the first guy that we're looking at is obviously, you guys know who he is. He's Adolf Hitler, right? There he is in the middle of a kind of a gathering in Germany, and he's kind of saluting the Nazi troops, right? So Adolf Hitler was officially named Chancellor of Germany in 1933. So he had kind of moved up the ranks, like we had talked about in last chapter. He kind of moved up the ranks, gained some control, and he was officially named Chancellor, which is kind of like, if you could think about it, it's kind of like president. So he was kind of put in charge of Germany in 1933. All right. This officially creates a totalitarian Nazi government. Okay. If you guys remember, if you look at the word totalitarian, I want you guys to focus on the fact that there's total in this word. Okay. So totalitarian, that just means that he has basically complete control over everyone in Germany. Okay. He can control what they hear on the radio, what they see in magazines or newspapers, what they see in posters, who gets to sell what in their businesses, what businesses can open up, what books people can read, who they can talk to, who they can't, who people can have relationships with, or even who people can make babies with. Okay. Anything in their day-to-day life, Hitler has a say in it and has control. So that's what this whole totalitarian, when we say that, that means he just has total control over everyone within Germany. All right. And so in March 1935, he announced that there was going to be a creation of the Air Force and actually began the military draft. Okay. So if you guys remember from the Treaty of Versailles, when we talked about that from the end of World War I, Germany was not permitted at all. I repeat, not permitted to create an air force or have any type of a military at all. They were supposed to have a really small, contained military, not very many weapons, basically like that, because they were trying to keep Germany at bay, right? Well, when Adolf Hitler comes into power, just 2 years after he's created chancellor, he creates something that's called the Luftwaffe, which is Luftwaffe is just the German word for air force. Okay, so he creates this giant air force and he begins to draft people for the military to build up Germany's military. They also begin, creating all these, building up their military weapons, training, creating the Hitler youth programs, all that stuff that they're not supposed to do according to the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler does it anyway, okay, because he thinks that he can just kind of do whatever he wants. All right. So at this point in 1935, this is kind of when things start to heat up. It's because he's beginning to create his own military and kind of boost Germany in that. All right. So Hitler's whole goal for his, I guess, reign, you could say, because he becomes dictator and is treated like a king in Germany at some points. Okay, his whole goal in this is something that's called Lebensraum, which I know that we've talked about it kind of last chapter, but Lebensraum is a German word for. Oops, I went too fast. Is a German word for living space. So ultimately, what Hitler wants is living space or Lebensraum for the German people. He wants them to have space to spread out, to spread the Aryan race, to create a more German type world, basically. He wants to expand Germany and its empire. All right. So the first bullet point there, he says he annexes Austria in 1938. What annex means is that he kind of just goes to Austria and says, "Hey, you want to be part of my empire?" And either Austria has a choice to say yes or no. In this choice, Austria said yes. So in that way, when Austria became part of the German Empire, Hitler had annexed it, meaning that he just kind of forced it, not really forced, but kind of just put it as a part of his empire, just kind of added it to his group. So in 1938, again, that's about 5 years after he becomes chancellor, he already has Austria kind of built in as part of the German Empire. Then he goes to the Sudetenland, and then the following year after that is all of Czechoslovakia. Okay, so he's slowly kind of building it out and building up. It's kind of like he's putting a puzzle piece together and kind of building it out and out and out and trying to really build up this German empire. Okay, so this leads us to this point where it's the Nazi Soviet pact. If you guys can see, there's this man right here. This is Joseph Stalin, if you remember him from last chapter. Okay, he's the guy who's in charge of Russia and who's helping to lead Russia. He's the Russian dictator. Okay, so this gets to the point where, like I said, Hitler's trying to build up this German empire. So in order to do that, sometimes you have to make deals or, pacts with other countries to make sure that you can get your goal. Because if another country is, if you're, say you're invading another country that's friends with Russia or Japan or Italy or whoever, you want to make sure that you're kind of covering your own behind and not going to get in trouble with other countries. Okay, so he goes with Stalin. He makes this pact that's called the Nazi Soviet Pact, and it's in August of 1939 that he officially gets that started. Okay, so what this pact really is that Germany signs a non aggression pact with the Soviet Union. That means that Germany agrees to not attack the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union agrees to not attack Germany. Okay, so they both kind of sign a truce and they say, we have bigger fish to fry. We kind of have bigger plans. So we're just kind of going to leave each other alone. All right. In this, they want to keep Britain from entering the war. Okay. They don't want any of the allies to get involved because as hard as it is to believe, a lot of them really didn't want a war again. Hitler did, yes, but Stalin especially, he didn't want to put his country through a war again, and he didn't want to get everyone involved and have this whole big kerfluffle. So they both agreed on keeping Britain from entering the war, and they agreed. Well, that's really hard to see. I apologize, but they agreed to split Poland among themselves. Okay, so Poland is a country that's between Germany and what starts Russia, and Germany, or Hitler rather, had his eyes set on Poland as the next place that he wanted to invade. But the problem with this is that Stalin is on the other. All right, guys. So I apologize. It kind of cut out there for a second, but um, I just wanted to continue what I was saying. So the problem with Germany wanting to invade Poland is the fact that Stalin is right on the other side of that. Okay, so um, he Hitler is trying to kind of protect himself and make sure that he can get what he wants, but also to not start a war with the Soviet Union because that would not be really great for Hitler. Okay, so the uh, goal of this whole thing is that Hitler wants to be able to invade Poland, but not have the threat of getting into a war with Stalin. So he kind of goes to Stalin and is like, hey, I want to invade Poland. How about you go in on it with me? We both promise to not attack each other. and bing, bang, boom, we can get what we want. You can have the eastern side of Poland, and I'll have the western side of Poland, and we'll kind of both be happy. All right. Um, so with this, uh, Stalin agrees. They end up signing the Nazi Soviet Pact, and we get to this point where Germany actually officially invades Poland. Okay, so this is really the start of World War II in Europe, is when Germany invades Poland. So they invade Poland September 1st, 1939. All right. So German blitzkrieg overruns Poland. What blitzkrieg is it's the German word for lightning, lightning war, or something that's very quick moving. All right. So Germany comes through Poland and it completely pushes through all of Poland and overruns them almost instantly. Okay. Poland put up a good fight, or tried to put up a good fight, but at the end of the day, it was a quick German victory, and Germany was able to completely overrun Poland and make it their own. All right. So it's on this day, once Britain and France find out that Germany had gone into Poland, they officially declare war on Germany. The reason that they declare war on Germany is because of the fact that Poland is one of their allies, or they at least want to protect Poland. So, up until this point, Britain and France had seen the fact that Germany is progressively kind of amping itself up and getting more and more dangerous. So Britain is trying to use, at first, Neville Chamberlain, the prime minister of Britain, is trying to use this strategy of appeasement. What appeasement means is basically you give in to what people want. So if Hitler wants this part of Czechoslovakia, Britain says, okay, you can have this part of Czechoslovakia, but you're not going to go anywhere else. All right. If we give you this little section, that means you're going to get it and you're going to be satisfied. And that means that you're going to go nowhere else. And then Hitler would go, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And then he'd turn around and do something else that he wasn't supposed to. And Britain would say, hey, now, okay, you can have this one more thing, but you better stop after this. And Hitler would say, oh, yeah, okay, I will. And it's the same thing over and over again. And so eventually Britain and France realize that there's no real way to appease the situation. They can't just give something over and then stop it there. They realize that Hitler is really on a war path. He is on the path to making the Third Reich and to making the German Empire. So when they say, hey, if you invade Poland, this is going to be an act of war. Okay, this is going to start the next war. So don't invade Poland. Like, we're kind of warning you here. Germany does it anyway, obviously, like what we just said. And because of the fact that they do it anyway, Britain and France are basically forced to protect Poland and to protect the fact that, kind of bringing on their promise of the fact that they were told, don't do this or we're going to go to war. So that's inevitably what happens. So the very start of World War II is actually in 1939. Now, I know a few of you think or have thought, or I've met a lot of people in my life that, they think just because the United States gets into the war in 1941, that must be the beginning of World War II. But in reality, it actually starts in 1939 in Europe, because in the beginning of the war, the United States is not involved at all until 1941. So the war is actually going on for a few years before the United States gets involved. Okay, so I want you guys to really focus on and remember September 1939. That is when World War II starts. Okay. All right, so now on the other side of things is the Japanese. All right, they're trying to do the same thing that Germany is, just in Asia instead of Europe. All right, so September of 1931, the Japanese seize Manchuria. Manchuria is a small, not really a small, it's kind of a nation, medium-sized nation that's directly above China. So they invade Manchuria, and they do this by impersonating the Chinese in something that's called the Mukden incident. So they kind of go in, the soldiers impersonate themselves with Chinese, and that's ultimately how they kind of capture Manchuria. Uh, and Japan begins to expand into North China. So they're kind of moving from Manchuria down into northern China. When the United States sees this, they refuse to recognize the seizure of Manchuria, meaning that they're kind of like, you need to quit. We're not going to realize that this Manchuria is now, quote unquote, a part of the Japanese empire because that was a seizure. You just kind of took that and said it was yours when it's not really. So we're not going to recognize that you actually did that. So, kind of, the United States is kind of just like, could you stop or could you not? Like, we don't want to get to war with you, but like, this is not cool, man. All right. So they're kind of like, you need to quit. But the Japanese don't quit. They increasingly build up their empire. So if you guys can see all of the red parts that are on this map in the background, all of these red colored in countries or sections of countries, these are all places that the Japanese had control of during 1942. Okay, so they're from 1931 all the way up to 1942. They're slowly acquiring all of this land throughout parts of Asia. I mean, they have Manchuria, parts of northern China, Korea, French Indochina, Malaya, the Philippines, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, Guam, the Marshall Islands, all of those things, Guadalcanal, New Guinea, all of these things that are places that the Japan has kind of gained control of in this about 10-year period. All right. So most generally though, they are focusing on China. They really want control with China. So this leads up to a point where they're actually going to be fighting with China in their own war. So the leader of China at this time is Chiang Kai-shek. He tries to avoid conflict with all able forces. He really does not want to go to war with Japan, especially because of the fact, I mean, yes, he doesn't want to lose any lives, and war is very expensive and all that other stuff, but just especially the fact that Japan is so much more talented when it comes to military than China is. Japan is a great military force. Okay, so he's really trying to avoid conflict. And because of that, he appeases Japan by allowing them to govern I can't speak. That he appeases Japan by allowing them to govern North China. What that means is, again, he's following the strategy of appeasement. It's like, we'll give you this thing, but please just stop there. So he's kind of like, look, I'll let you govern North China as long as you don't invade anywhere else. Like, you guys can have North China and take that part. That's fine, but don't go anywhere else. All right. Ultimately, the Japanese are not going to do that. So in December 1936, Chiang formed a front against the Japanese to try and protect the rest of China from Japanese invasion. In July of 1937, the Chinese and the Japanese forces clash in Beijing, and Japan then ends up seizing Nanking in December of 1937. So China tries to stop them, but it doesn't really end up working out in their favor. They kind of end up losing some more cities and some more land to them than what originally was planned, or what they tried to avoid. This leads to a whole new Asian order. Okay. This was a new order with Manchuria and China. And in this, the Japanese are attempting to make a deal with Nazi Germany in order to take Siberia from the Soviet Union. So, like we talked about earlier, not only is the Soviet Union, not only is Germany making deals with the Soviet Union, but they're also looking to make deals with Japan against the Soviet Union. If you guys remember the Nazi Soviet Pact, Germany cannot be aggressive towards the Soviet Union, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be friends with someone else who is aggressive towards the Soviet Union. Okay, so again, this is why Hitler is very, very tricky and sneaky, and he kind of uses these things in order to get his way or to help other countries kind of take down bigger enemies. basically. Uh, he's kind of following the mantra of the enemy of your enemy is your friend. Okay. So inevitably, he is trying to use Japan in order to take down the Soviet Union. Uh, so the United States sees that that Japan is moving quickly or more and more quicker through um, China and Asia, and that they're making these deals with the Nazis and all these other things. And so the United States threatens economic sanctions. What that means is that would mean that the United States is going to basically cut off Japan from anything that comes from the United States, which is a big blow because the United States actually supplies Japan with a lot of oil and fuel and machinery that they need to continue on this war path with their great war machine. So the United States sees this and is like, "Hey, if you keep doing this, I'm going to take things away from you. Like I'm going to take these much needed things that you really want away from you. So please just stop or we're going to do this." And so this really made the Japanese mad and it really offended them. So the Japanese, led by Hideki Tojo, they attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor and they attack European colonies in Southeast Asia. So because of the fact that the United States threatens Japan, it ends up kind of coming back to bite us in the butt because of the fact that this leads to the attack on Pearl Harbor. But we'll get to that in a few days or a few slides. Okay. So the last couple things we're going to talk about is kind of France's Maginot Line. This is going to be the big steps in the war, what really kind of gets it moving in reality. So if you guys notice the big thick red line that's between Germany and France towards the bottom of your map. So the Maginot Line is basically a long line of defenses that France has put up between Germany and its borders. Okay, so the really thick line that I just drew your attention to a second ago, those are the strong fortifications. Those are the big forts, the thick cement walls, the big artillery guns, the most supplied areas along this line. These are the really, really strong fortifications. All right, it's going to be really difficult to get through those lines. Now, the polka dot lines or the dotted line along the Maginot Line, those are the weak fortifications. Basically, these are just kind of small little outposts. They don't really have very much supplies. They're a lot easier. They don't have as many men. They don't have as many men, and they're a lot easier to get through. Okay, so in this, France thinks, let's just block the border from Germany, right? Let's make the German border right along here really hard to get into. But this side, we're not as worried about, okay? Because of the fact that in Belgium, there's this place called the Ardennes Forest. And that's really a thick forest to get through. So they're probably not going to come through this way. So let's make these fortifications a lot thicker and a lot harder to get through rather than these, which in reality, I mean, it sounds like a good plan, but it's not going to work. And it ends up biting them in the butt because what happens is these are all built in World War II or after World War I. So these are the fortifications that we're talking about here. This is kind of what they look like. And if you can see, these are pretty large compared to just the average size of a guy. All right. These are really big fortifications and they are worth a lot, but they're not along the entire border. So Germany ends up in May of 1940, ends up going through the Ardennes Forest around the Maginot Line in that little polka dot section and ends up invading France. Now, he goes through this so quickly that France has no choice but to surrender. It only takes him about 10 days to go through Belgium and to get to the coast of France. So that's very, very quick. So in this kind of political cartoon, you guys can see in the background that there's Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, the guy from Italy. They kind of both have this lady who is the Lady Liberty of France. She's shackled up and she's got a gun and a knife to her neck that they're forcing her to sign this piece of paper telling them that they now control France, right? So in this, the fall of France is a huge part of World War II. And it starts ultimately in 1940. And the Axis powers, meaning Germany and Italy, have control of France for a majority of the war. This is about 6 months after the war started, they got control of France, and they have control of it until June 6th, 1944, when the D-Day invasion happens. Okay? So they got control of France and they had it for a hot sec. All right. So this is probably about where we're going to end it, because Dunkirk is going to be a little bit later into what we're talking about. And we're just going to continue from there the next time I upload a little video about this. Okay. So I hope you guys were able to hear that okay. I'm sorry that it ended up cutting out in the middle of it. But I hope you guys are having a great time. I hope that wasn't too boring. Um, if you have any questions, go ahead and you can message me on Class Dojo or um, Google Classroom if you need to. Um, other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. So I will see you guys later.